The billionaire tried to assault the orphan, not knowing she knew his dark secret. The penthouse lights glowed over downtown Manhattan, a skyline built on money and silence. Claire Walker stood near the glass wall, her hands steady, her face calm. To anyone watching, she looked like what she was supposed to be, an orphaned charity intern grateful for a night invite from a powerful man. Richard Hale adjusted his cufflinks, smiling the kind of smile that bought boardrooms and buried scandals. He had made billions in real estate, private equity, and insurance investments. People called him a visionary. Claire knew better. "You're quiet," Richard said, stepping closer. "City life can be overwhelming at first." Claire nodded slightly. "I'm learning." His hand brushed her arm, then lingered. The room suddenly felt smaller. Claire took one step back, her eyes never leaving his. "That's far enough," she said evenly. Richard chuckled, dismissive. "Don't be dramatic, I'm just being friendly." But Claire's calm didn't break. Instead, something unreadable passed through her eyes. Knowledge. Certainty. "You should stop, especially tonight." Richard's smile tightened. He didn't know that the orphan he underestimated had spent years surviving systems men like him controlled. He didn't know she'd seen the documents, or the offshore accounts, or the name he buried 20 years ago. And he definitely didn't know this was the beginning of his fall. Claire Walker left the penthouse just after midnight, the city humming like nothing had happened. To the outside world, she was invisible again, a charity case, a nobody, an orphan raised in the foster system. But Claire had learned early that being underestimated was power. She rode the elevator down alone, replaying Richard Hale's voice, his confidence, his careless touch. Men like him always believed they were untouchable. They believed records disappeared forever. They were wrong. Claire's childhood had been shaped by silence. No parents, no inheritance, no safety net. What she did have was a sharp mind and a memory that never forgot names, especially the name attached to the file she found years ago while cleaning offices for extra money: Richard Hale. At the time, she hadn't understood why the name made her chest tighten. Only later did she connect it to the sealed court records, the falsified insurance claims, the warehouse fire that killed 3 people, including a woman who shared her last name: her mother. Claire stepped onto the sidewalk, rain starting to fall. She wasn't here for charity. She wasn't here by accident. She had come to see how close she could get to the man who destroyed her family. And tonight, he had shown her exactly who he still was. The next morning, Claire sat in a quiet public library in Brooklyn, sunlight cutting through tall windows. In front of her lay a thin folder, creased and copied and guarded like gold. Inside were financial records, shell companies, and one death certificate marked accidental. Claire traced her finger over the date, 22 years ago, the same year she entered foster care. She remembered the fire in only fragments: smoke, sirens, a woman's voice telling her to run. Richard Hale's company had insured the building. The payout was enormous. The investigation ended quickly. Too quickly. A librarian passed by, and Claire closed the folder calmly. She had learned patience in group homes, learned how to wait until the moment was right. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Dinner tonight. We should talk." She stared at the message for a long time. Richard thought he was in control. He thought she was afraid. What he didn't know was that Claire had already sent copies of the file to a journalist, one who specialized in financial crimes and wrongful death cases. She hadn't pressed send yet. That button was her leverage. And leverage, Claire knew, was everything. The restaurant overlooked the river. Glass walls, low music, and money in every detail. Richard Hale arrived confident, relaxed, as if nothing had gone wrong the night before. Claire arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. "You look tired," Richard said, pouring wine. "I didn't sleep. I was thinking." His eyes narrowed slightly. "About what?" "About truth." The word landed heavy between them. Richard leaned back. "Careful, Claire. Truth depends on who's telling the story." Claire smiled, small and controlled. "Then you should be very careful about mine." She slid her phone across the table, screen facing him. One document open. A familiar address. A familiar fire. Richard's face drained of color. "That file doesn't exist," he said quietly. "It does," Claire answered, "and so do the others." The restaurant noise faded for him. For the first time, the billionaire realized the orphan wasn't powerless. She wasn't naive. She was prepared. "What do you want?" he asked. Claire met his eyes. "Justice, and your silence forever." Richard didn't answer immediately. He studied Claire the way men like him always did, looking for weakness, fear, desperation. He found none. "You think you can ruin me?" he finally said. "Men have tried." "I know," Claire replied calmly. "They didn't have what I have." She leaned forward. "You hurt women because you think no one sees them. You destroy lives because money erases consequences." Richard's jaw tightened. "What's your price?" Claire stood. "This isn't a business deal." She pulled out a second phone and placed it beside his glass. On the screen was an email draft addressed to a federal investigator. Attachments included financial trails, witness statements, and the fire report that never made the news. "I don't want your money," she said. "I want your confession, on record." Silence stretched between them. For the first time in decades, Richard Hale was afraid, not of prison, but of being exposed as exactly who he was. Claire walked away without waiting for his answer, because she already knew how this would end. 2 days later, headlines exploded across every major network. "Billionaire real estate mogul under federal investigation." Claire watched the news from a modest apartment, her hands wrapped around a mug she barely touched. Richard Hale had tried to delay. He had tried to negotiate, but fear had finally won. His recorded confession played in fragments. He admitted to falsifying insurance claims. He admitted to bribing officials. He did not say her mother's name out loud, but the dates, the location, the fire were undeniable. The city reacted the way cities always do: shock, outrage, disbelief. For Claire, there was no celebration, only release. Her phone rang constantly. Journalists, lawyers, advocates. She ignored them all except one call from the investigator. "You did something very brave and very dangerous." Claire looked at the window, at the same skyline that once made her feel small. "I just told the truth." That night, she visited the river where her mother used to take her as a child. She whispered, "It's over now." For the first time, she believed it. The court proceedings were long, public, and unforgiving. Richard Hale's empire collapsed piece by piece, assets frozen, properties seized, board members resigned. Claire attended only one hearing. When the judge read the list of victims connected to the warehouse fire, Claire stood quietly as her mother's name was spoken, no longer buried, no longer erased. Afterward, a woman approached her in the hallway. She was older, tired, but kind. "I worked with your mother," the woman said. "She tried to stop it. She warned people." Claire swallowed hard. Why didn't anyone listen? The woman sighed. Because powerful men are loud and good women are often ignored. That changed that day. A victims fund was created using seized assets. Claire declined personal compensation. Instead, she requested scholarships for foster children and funding for fire safety programs. When asked why, she answered simply, "Someone once saved me. I'm just returning the favor." The orphan who had no voice now carried many. Months later, Claire walked through a newly opened community center in Chicago. The sign outside read, "The Walker Foundation. Advocacy, Education, Protection." She didn't cut the ribbon. She stood in the back, watching families walk in, watching children laugh. A social worker named Daniel joined her. "You could have disappeared after everything," he said. "Most people would." Claire smiled softly. "I spent my whole life invisible. I'm done hiding." They worked together. Long days, hard conversations, real change. Daniel never asked about her past. He listened when she shared it. Trust grew slowly, carefully. One evening, as they locked up the center, Daniel said, "You know, you didn't just expose a criminal. You gave people hope." Claire looked up at the city lights. Hope is the one thing no one should ever steal. For the first time, the future felt like something she could build without fear. Richard Hale requested one meeting before sentencing. Claire agreed, on her terms. They met in a plain room. No suits, no glass walls, just 2 chairs and the truth. "You destroyed everything I built," Richard said bitterly. Claire met his gaze. "No, you destroyed it the day you chose profit over lives." He laughed weakly. "You think this fixes anything?" Claire stood. "It fixed me." She paused at the door. "You tried to hurt me because you thought I was alone. You were wrong." Richard said nothing. He had no power left. Claire walked out without looking back, feeling lighter than she ever had. Some endings didn't need forgiveness. They needed closure. And she had it. Years later, Claire stood at a podium, not as a victim, not as an orphan, but as a leader. The room was filled with policymakers, advocates, and young people from the foster system. "I was told my past defined me, but it only prepared me." She spoke about accountability, about protection, about courage. After the event, a young girl approached her. "Do you think someone like me can make a difference?" Claire knelt to her level. "You already are." As the crowd faded, Claire stepped outside into the city air. The same world that once tried to break her now stood changed because she refused to stay silent. She wasn't the orphan they underestimated anymore. She was the woman who knew the truth, and she made it impossible to ignore.